Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so excited to be here with you today. And we're here in a brave new world, aren't we? Where we're trying to navigate all of this technology and get the word out to everyone. But it's also exciting, right? Because we can talk to people from all over the country. So I am Katrina Floyd, and I am with Trust for Learning. I'm the Grant Partnerships manager here, and I've got two wonderful speakers with me, and I'm going to share my screen here so that you guys can see and I can get some introductions done. Let's see, here we go. Here we go. All right, so if you're in the right place, you are here to see Making the Ideal Real, Foundational Principles for High Quality Early Learning. And our learning outcomes today, what we're hoping that you will walk away with is gaining an understanding of what high quality early childhood looks like in a charter school ECE setting, and also learn about available resources for teachers, for school leaders, on how we're going to implement these ideal learning approaches to create more equitable access for each and every child. So I have introduced myself. My first name's Katrina. It's pronounced Katrina because it's Norwegian, so it looks like Catherine. And then I'm going to let Hannah Richardson introduce herself. Take it away, Hannah. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Hannah Richardson. I'm the Director of Curriculum and Instruction at Breakthrough Montessori Public Charter School located in Washington, D.C. We are a relatively new charter school in the landscape of DC. This is our 6th year coming up, and I'm really excited to share some information with you about how we work today. Thank you.
Great. All right, Sarah, you introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Sarah Arnold. I'm the head of school at Northeast Woodland Chartered Public School in New Hampshire. We're up in the White Mountains, and we are a brand new charter school. We opened this year, but I've been head of school and early childhood director for my entire adult life. And so I'll talk to you about early childhood here and in Waldorf settings and in ideal learning settings.
Great. Great, thank you. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of information about what ideal learning is. And a lot of you have probably heard most of these principles. People call it the whole child approach or play-based. And ideal learning is, let me advance here. So ideal learning is a phrase that came up during a big roundtable of all of these people that you see listed here, had all gotten together with the Trust for Learning to talk about what is high quality early childhood and how do we make sure that all kids have access to this, particularly in public settings. And so what ended up happening is, we've got people like HighScope and Reggio and Montessori and Waldorf and all these incredible people. And we all have a little bit of a different philosophical bent in terms of what exactly high quality early learning looks like on the ground. But what my boss actually said is, hey, what if we didn't look at what was different? What if we looked at what we all have that is similar? What are the things that we all know or kids need to have high quality early learning? And so that's where these principles came from. And these principles are all of these ideals about, particularly about equity and how do we impact all aspects of children's development, their physical, their cognitive, their mental, their social, emotional, and you will have heard probably it referred to as whole child or student-centered learning. And where ideal learning falls is that on the one side, you may have completely play-based classrooms where there isn't a lot of structure. So maybe the kids are playing, but the teachers don't necessarily have a plan for where the play is leading. And it's very, 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 very loose. There's a lot of play, but there's not a lot of adult support. So it's really just kind of children playing on their own. Now, on the other side, we have flashcards, and we have worksheets, and we have very teacher-led instruction with that's very scripted. And we wanted to make sure that we found something kind of in that sweet spot in the middle. So you'll see there that ideal learning in that circle is the classroom's rich in child-initiated play, but then there's also active adults present. And so I never called them teachers. I always called them maybe you call them guides, or maybe you call them something else, but it's not really about the adult being able to present information and children pick up on that information from the adult. It's really about the child being able to interact with their peers and with the environment and with the other adults in the room so that they are learning based on their interests. So they're very playful classrooms with focused learning. The teachers are guiding this learning. It's very experiential. So that's sort of that sweet spot that we're looking at for ideal learning approaches. So here you have a picture of what all the principles of ideal learning are in terms of equity, personalized instruction, play, of course, being the essential element to access children's brain capacity, and the teacher acts as a guide. They're a nurturing presence, they're a co-constructor of knowledge, but children are the ones constructing the knowledge from their diverse experiences. We're also looking at children and adults learning through relationships with one another, relationships with peers, and really talking about that holy spot right in between two people's noses where all that learning happens. We're looking also at the environment, so that there's an intentional design to the environment to be able to facilitate independence and exploration. Of course, we've got the adults, and we've talked a lot in the past about the adults and what we need to do about compensation and things like that. But how do we support adults so that they are best able to hold these tenets and help kids move along their developmental trajectory? And then that last one is about probably my favorite. The time of childhood is valued, that we're really looking at not just, how can we make these kids ready for the future, but who are they right now? How can we be in this moment with them and really, really put value on where they are right now? So I'm going to turn the time over to Hannah, who's going to talk with us a little bit about what ideal learning looks like through a Montessori lens. So Hannah, take it away.
Thank you so much. I'd like to give you a little bit of background about Montessori, just paint some broad strokes for you in case you're new to learning about this. In Montessori, we really focused on individualized learning for children. We follow a scope and sequence, yet make sure each child is able to move through it in their own way, in their own time. We have classrooms that are mixed ages. So while our school serves children ages 3 to 12, it's groups of 3-year age spans that are together. So ages 3 to 6, 6 to 9, 9 to 12. We really focus a lot on independence for children. We want to give them every opportunity possible to be able to do for themselves. And we really have an environment that allows as much freedom as possible for children, knowing that they are able to have freedoms based on the skills that they have, the knowledge that they have, etc. So I'm going to focus this morning on talking about how this relates to the primary age child, or the child ages 3 to 6. Next slide, please. I've chosen a few of the principles of ideal learning that really speak to the ways in which a Montessori education caters to the young child, and I'd like to share some of those with you. The first one that I chose is that decision-making reflects a commitment to equity. It's really important to us that when we're thinking about serving children, we're thinking about serving all children. We need to make sure that we are able to serve every child who walks through the door, and that every adult is ready to do so. Next slide, please. At our school, we have a saying that every decision that we make is done so with the child at the center. So whether it be we are talking about the budget, whether it be we are talking about policies, whether it be that we are talking about wraparound services, we always make sure that this is always done thinking about how ultimately it will serve the best needs of the child. We are very clear with all adults, both staff members as well as community members, that it won't always be what's easiest for the adults. It won't always be what's most convenient, but every decision we make will always be what's best for children. So when we think about equity for the child, we really want to make sure that everybody knows where we stand. And so we are very clear that we support every child. We have supports in place for wraparound services for children. And we really try to embed our ABAR work for the adult and the child at every level. So it comes into the classroom in terms of the ways that we introduce curriculum to children. And also all of our adults go through ABAR training because we want to make sure, again, that we are serving every child appropriately that comes through our door. When we think about equity for community, we stand very strongly by the way that we do support all families. We have a number of different families and different family makeups that come to our school, and we want them to know that we support them and we are on this journey with them to serve their children. Furthermore, when we are doing any type of policy work or strategic planning, we make sure that there are seats at the table for family and community members to join us, knowing that they also are working hard to do what's best for children. Next slide, please. So some examples of the ways that this might come into play in everyday life are that we offer scholarships for before and after care for all children and families that are in need. We have never had a programming problem where we're not able to serve all families. We make sure that we are able to fit the needs that we have. When we are filling positions on our board, we make sure that they are to be filled by people of the global majority so that many different community members are coming to the table and that it's not just filled by folks who may have already made their way to positions of power in the community. Also, we make sure that we pay everyone, particularly people of color, for their time and contributions outside of the workday. So if someone is there to advise us on ways that we can better serve cultures, if they're able to bring knowledge to the community around, the way that DC works or the neighboring communities or anything of that nature, we make sure that people are paid for their time because we think that this is an important part of serving equity in the school. Next slide, please. Another principle of ideal learning that is near and dear to the Montessori way of life is that instruction is personalized to acknowledge each child's development and abilities. We really work hard to make sure that children are moving along at their own pace and that we're not pushing them in a direction that they are not ready, and also not holding them back from things for which they are ready. Next slide. We believe that each child is on their own personal journey toward adulthood. And furthermore, the biggest work of every child is to become an adult. We often forget as adults that we all too were once in this position where adulthood seemed so far away. We want to make sure that we are nurturing that experience. So, our experience is one that is child-led. Children in our schools have freedom to choose their work based on lessons that they have been given by their guide. Children have the freedom to choose where they work, as long as they are not hindering the movement of others. And children have the freedom to choose how much time they are investing in said work. Oftentimes we know that children have this innate push, this yearning for a piece of knowledge or an experience, and they will continue to work on it until they have mastered that skill or ability. And we want to make sure that we're setting the stage so that they can do that. Also, it's really individually focused. The curriculum, as I said, follows a scope and sequence, but it allows room for exploration. We think of it like a giant web where pieces from this end and that end can be pulled together when needed, knowing that by the end of the child's experience, they will have explored the entirety of the web, but they may go about it in different ways. We make sure that our lessons are available to all children by being able to alter them to fit the need of any child that needs to do so. Next slide, please. Some examples in this realm might look like projects and lesson choices that are guided by children. So for instance, new food experience lessons are added to practical life, which is one of our areas, once children have learned about it. Also, if a child really enjoys something, we work for ways to incorporate that into their learning, making sure that we are supporting their level of engagement in the classroom. We want every child to feel safe, comfortable, and at home in the space. Next slide. The third principle of ideal learning that I chose is that the teacher is a guide, nurturing presence, and a co-constructor of knowledge. Next slide. In the Montessori environment, we call the teacher a guide. We refer to them all as such, both internally as well as externally, to make sure that people continue to understand the role and its importance. These are some quotes from Maria Montessori herself. The teacher has two tasks: to lead the children to concentration and to help them in their development afterwards. An ordinary teacher cannot be transformed into a Montessori teacher, but must be created anew, having rid herself of pedagogical prejudices. The first step is self-preparation of the imagination. For the Montessori teacher has to visualize a child who is not yet there, materially speaking, and must have faith in the child who will reveal himself through work. To me, this really speaks to the idea that the biggest work of the guide is to really work on the self and to try to rid the self of all of the stereotypes that we bring in as adults in an adult-led society, and really think about the child first and all it is that they are able to offer and will offer, and love who they are capable of becoming. We love children because of their potential. Next slide. In practice, this looks like the words we use. We call the adult a guide rather than teacher. The way we practice, the fact that we never force children to do things, but rather encourage, guide, and support. We believe strongly that the child wants to do their own, so we follow the model that we should help each child to do it themselves. And lastly, we want to make sure that we offer each child the respect of someone whom we admire. That helps always keep us in the right mind space so that we are serving the child's needs with the utmost respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. That was great. Hannah really addressed the principles of equity and personalized instruction, which are incredibly important in the life of a child and contribute to their experience of being in a safe environment where they are valued, seen, and heard. So in my presentation, I'm going to continue to develop the idea of how a young child should feel in school. What are the experiences that we want to bring them so that they have these very positive feelings about school and learning and interacting with peers and with the adults in the environment. So the very first principle that I've chosen to focus on is the time of childhood is valued. And at the Ideal Learning Roundtable, there was this very clear agreement about this, that the period of early childhood from 0 and to 6 or 7 or 8, each approach sees that end a little bit differently, is a unique time in a child's development, in a human being's development. So Rudolf Steiner said, if a child has been able in their play to give their whole loving being to the world around them, they will be able, in the serious tasks of later life, to devote themselves with confidence and power to the service of the world. And so that is our goal in educating children, is to envision these adults that they can be and facilitate their development along that path. So in Waldorf education, we have 3 different kinds of development that are always ongoing all the time in a child's life that we're thinking about. We think about the will, which you can kind of think of as including the ability to persevere. And also I like to think of it as actualization, so that a child has an idea or a thought in their head, and then they're able to fully expand that and then bring creative force to that, bring it out into the world, into a physical presence. So they have worked through this process of creation through will activity. Then there's heart development, which sort of is relationship and imagination. And that while that is always ongoing through a child's life, we see like 0 to 7, that development of the will is sort of the predominating development. And then heart is the predominating development going on between the ages of 7 and 14. And then the third kind of development that's always ongoing too is the development of the mind. So this is really the intellect and emotion, and you might think of it a little bit like the psyche. So it's fuller than just intellect. It's the whole person that you are as you are traveling along this path of development. And we see that in the forefront, like the primary form of development of the ages 14 to 21. So next slide. So I want these pictures. So Rudolf Steiner, in that quote, he really talked about giving yourself completely with almost a devoted aspect to it. And so the slide on the left shows children sort of hidden from view almost inside a fort that they've constructed out of trees and birch bark. And then to the right is a group of children who are engaged in a different kind of play. So a very physical play, almost wallowing in the mud, but there's definitely a plan going on there. You can see the 3 children in a line in their yellow rain pants are kind of almost like a stop take of one person doing something as they're going along. Next slide. So this is in a Waldorf early childhood program. This is a play that you might see. So storytelling is a very foundational aspect of Waldorf early childhood programs. The teacher engages in oral storytelling, and that's something that the children are able to imitate and bring into play. So this is a scene where the little boy in the green and black shirt has set up a story that he's about to tell. And there's 2 friends are coming in to see what is the story? What's going to happen? What's he telling? And so that's, again, that deep in self-initiated activity, but it's very planful that teachers are creating this environment in which storytelling is a very important part. And that's something the children are bringing to their play. And in the back of them, there's 2 other children engaged in a different play, but also storytelling aspects. So you see the one child has a cape and the 2 children are doing something together. Slide. This is just a few weeks ago. So at our school, we abut conservation trails that we can take down to the Saco River. And this was on a very hot day. The kindergarten hiked down to the Saco. So that's about a mile walk. So there's that big feeling of accomplishment that comes in going someplace important. And then the children here, again, are fully immersed in the water and in the play, engaging in the sand and with each other. And if you look around the picture, you can see different groupings of children really engaging with each other and talking, and some other children engaging in physical play. Next slide. So the second ideal principle that I wanted to focus on is young children and adults learn through relationship. And so social activity is learning activity. And it's important, the interactions that children have with adults in the classroom are very important and foundational to everything that goes on. But I think in research, there's less of a focus on the importance of the social relationships between the young children themselves. When we're thinking about language development, there is that imitation of the adult speech and bringing that into their own speech and experimentation that they do. But the adult can't interact with every single child all the time. And the children have all these opportunities to use language with each other. And so we want to make sure that we're really creating opportunities for them to learn from each other as well, not just from the adults in the classroom. Next slide. This is a picture that I love. It's not a professional picture and it's on an old phone, so it's a little bit fuzzy, but these two 4-year-old boys have created this little world that you can see in this picture, where they pulled together 2 play stands, 2 chairs inside, set up the tree stump that their feet are resting on. And then they've also gathered from around the room, all kinds of different manipulative items that they've placed on the shelf, which is a play structure behind them. And they're deeply engaged in looking at these manipulative shells and rocks that they've got and talking about them. Next slide. This is 4 kindergarten children outside in the snow, and that heart is a heart that they've created through cooperative play together. So they gathered all kinds of branches and made that beautiful heart out of the branches, and then the 4 of them are engaged in a group hug. So really, that idea that Katrina brought at the beginning, where she said that sacred space of learning happens in the distance between our 2 noses. So that's drawn from a quote from Mr. Rogers, but really that these are children interacting with each other and learning from each other and thinking and doing and acting in the world in that devoted way that Rudolf Steiner talked about, so that as they go out and they get more and more into academic materials, they can bring that devotion to their learning as they continue on their academic journey for the rest of the way. And so I think one of the things that everybody at the Ideal Learning Roundtable really agrees on is the idea of, instead of pushing down the ways that we teach older children into younger and younger classrooms, we really need to think about, how do we push up some of the great things that we know about quality early childhood into those older classrooms, so we can keep children learning in this devoted way where they have this amazing sense of accomplishment for what they have done out of themselves. Next slide. Within Waldorf education, a third kind of feelings that we really want to think about bringing to young children and older children are these 3 that we always group together. So reverence, joy, and wonder. That those are things that we want children, we don't want to talk to them about them. We want them to have experiences of them. And we work on that through the idea of creating a festival life for the school. So this first picture is from a flower festival where children are making flower crowns and planting plants that can be given away as gifts to neighbors and friends. And so this is a very exuberant, joyful celebration. So that's what we're bringing to the children. And this involves a lot of cross-age interactions so that the children are having older children helping them do things. The younger children are experiencing that these older children have greater capabilities and are able to help them down the road and participating in these activities. Next slide. This is another kind of festival that you'll find in a lot of Waldorf schools. We call it the Winter Spiral Garden. So this is much more of a reverent festival. Children experience this in small groups. You can see there's a spiral of evergreen branches that's been laid out in this field. And each class will come and students will walk one by one through the garden spiral. And they'll be carrying an apple with a candle in it. And in the center, they'll light the candle. They'll walk out and they'll place it somewhere on the spiral. So putting their own personal light into this beautiful group spiral that they're creating as a class. Next. And this is a third very different kind of festival, Hike a Mountain Day, which is focused on creating that feeling of accomplishment. So taking on a challenge that could be kind of hard. This is a group of first grade students who've hiked to the top of Mount Cranmore, and in all they did about 5 miles on this hike that day. They were carrying their lunches with them, so they hiked up on a kind of windy path to the top of Mount Cranmore, ate their picnic lunch and played, and then hiked back down. So you can see the presentation, I was really focused on the kinds of feelings we want to make sure children have as they access their education, and having a real devotion to the activities that they are engaging in so they can bring that into their work for the rest of their lives and hopefully change the world. Children have been able to practice full engagement, devotion to activity, experience that satisfaction of accomplishment. They can have a flourishing life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Hannah. I thought we tried really hard to leave some time here for questions. And now Mike, he's our tech person. Can people unmute and ask the questions, or do they have to go in the box maybe? So over to your right, there's a chat and a Q&A and a polls box and a moderator box. So if you've got a question, you can put it in the Q&A. But I thought if people are okay with it, I'm going to answer some questions that come up every time that I ask. So I'm getting a question here for are there particular curriculum you would recommend best for our youngest learners? And thank you for asking that, because that's a question we get a lot of. And actually, you can use the principles of ideal learning in any curriculum that you're doing, as long as it is developmentally appropriate and play-based. So we have people across the country using creative curriculum, Waldorf, Montessori, Reggio, high scope, just about any kind of developmentally appropriate curriculum that you find. And also what some people have been doing is if they possibly have an administrator who is pushing a little bit more on the academic types of curriculum, we are suggesting that they maybe choose a couple of the principles of ideal learning and try to incorporate those into what they're doing on a daily basis, and then building upon that. Because what we have found is, particularly with principals and superintendents who have the best intentions, but possibly do not have any kind of education or training in early childhood development, it's possible that they think, oh, okay, well, I need kids to learn how to read. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do flashcards, and we're going to do worksheets, and we're going to do, a lot of reading exercises. And then they come to me and they say, well, I don't understand why I'm not getting the outcomes that I'm hoping for. And it's because there's a lack of understanding of how children's brain development works. And with the way children's brains work, generally from about birth to age 8, if you don't access their brains through play, through interaction, through their choice of materials, through their interests, you see very little activity happening. So when you actually can hook children up to they have probes on their heads, and we're looking at, how is their brain expanding? When you are looking at flashcards, worksheets, we call it kind of academic drill and kill. You see very little happening in their brain, very little growth. And then when you are looking at a child, maybe who is feeling, let's say I want to teach the children about the letter M. So one way I can do it is with a flashcard. Another way I can do it is to sit with them at the writing center and say, oh, you want to write a letter to your mom? Okay, mom, how would I spell mom? What letter sound is that? Oh, that's the letter M, and this is how I write an M. And then all of a sudden you see just the brain exploding. I mean, it just looks like a tree with branches coming off of it. So I'm teaching the very same academic fact, but I'm teaching it in a way that's going to access children's brain development. And that's the thing that we as early childhood folks have to help people who haven't been trained in early childhood to understand. So hopefully that makes sense. Hannah or Sarah, do you have anything to add about that, about kind of accessing learning?
And I would just include that so much of it is about following the child, that if you are following the child and you are taking their lead in what is interesting them, what is motivating them to move forward, you really can't go wrong.
I double down on that advice. So as a child is interested in starting to notice letters, then you start bringing it to them as much as they want it. And when you notice that their attention is waning, then you move on and work with somebody else or do something else. So you want to join them in the activity and take them as far as they're interested in going at that time.
I take administrators through early childhood classrooms. I really try to help understand that we don't exactly teach children. What we do is we facilitate the dance. So I stand them in a classroom and I have them see what the teachers are doing. They're sitting on the floor and they're playing with blocks and they're saying, oh, you know what? If I take one of these blocks, I would need 2 of these to make the same. Oh, okay, so they're half. Right? So I just had a math lesson there without sitting the child down and saying, okay, now we're going to learn math. Same thing at snack. Snack and lunch is a great way. So I have a child passing out napkins and I say, oh my goodness, we don't have enough napkins for all the kids. Let's see how many napkins we have and let's see how many kids we have. All right, how many more napkins do we need? Well, I've just taught subtraction, but I've taught it in a way where I can really access children's learning. So that's really what it's about, is how do we hook into what the children already know, hook into what they're really interested in, and then push their learning from there. So any other questions from people that are listening? What I love about this question, Ronelle, is that you don't have to use a particular curriculum. And there are some incredible programs that are out there that are very to fidelity, like Hannah's program and Sarah's program. They're very much to fidelity for a particular curriculum approach. But I also know that as long as you're focusing on equity and you're doing all of those things, you're focusing on the interests of the child, you difference in the lives of children. So that's kind of what I appreciate about Ideal Learning, is that it's almost like, how they always say that, oh, we're preaching to the choir, right? Because we are all sort of in the same mind frame. What the principles of Ideal Learning do is that they give us the same voice to sing in. So that even if you're Reggio, you're Montessori, you're High Scope, or any of those things, we can use Ideal Learning to really advocate for what we know is right in an early childhood classroom. So I just put up the slide that has my email address and also my phone number on it. So if you have questions about Ideal Learning, or you want to know sort of how you can bring that into your program, please feel free to reach out to me. Also, I put down underneath the description is if you'd like to sign up for the Trust for Learning newsletter. That tells you a lot about Ideal Learning. It tells you about grants that are out there to implement Ideal Learning strategies, things like that. So there's a lot of information out there, and I want to make sure that you can access it. So if we don't get to your question, you can absolutely do that. So let's see. Oh, yeah, I love this question, Emily. So Emily says, I think there's often an assumption that play-based ECE is incompatible with charter accountability. Can you talk about what data is incorporated into your charter contract and authorize a relationship? So obviously both Sarah and Hannah are in charter schools. There's also charter schools in DC, I think, have a little bit of a leg up on the rest of the country. They seem to be doing some really cool things in early childhood. So I could definitely, Emily, put you in touch with people about how to sort of negotiate that. But I know that KIP in DC is doing, I believe they're doing Tools of the Mind, and Tools of the Mind is another program that is very compatible with Ideal Learning. But we do have lots of examples out there of charters who are doing this developmentally appropriate, play-based, experiential learning. And so Emily, if you wouldn't mind reaching out to me so that we have a little bit more time, because right now I've only got a few seconds left, I think, before we end. But definitely don't let the question drop. I'd love to talk to you about that. Any last thoughts, Sarah or Hannah, before we sign out?
Nope, just thank you all for coming today. I really appreciate the opportunity to share some of the work that we love with you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes. So I just love this. I love that you guys are so engaged, and reach out to me if you have questions. I just think this is our charge, right? Is we got to make this world a fabulous place for our little ones. So thank you guys for joining. We really appreciate it. Oh, and if you get a chance, if you could fill out the evaluation right below, we would really appreciate that as well. We do read all of them and we take them very seriously. We're very interested in having presentations that are helpful to you. So if you could fill out that evaluation, we would really appreciate it. All right. Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.